So despite all the hype with electric cars in the media, there actually hasn't been a better time to buy a gasoline-powered hot hatch. If you look at the Civic Type R, when this thing came to market 2 years ago, it quickly became the king of the segment. In fact, in my most recent comparison test, when I compared it against the much less expensive Veloster N, I quickly realized that the Type R was just simply a better weapon if you plan on taking your vehicle out to the track. So in today's video, I've brought a competitor that is much more fitting against the Type R. This is the hottest Golf you can buy from Volkswagen, a 2019 Golf R equipped with a turbocharged engine with nearly 300 horsepower, standard 4-motion all-wheel drive, and it's the only hot hatch to offer a quick shifting 7-speed dual clutch transmission. So if you guys have roughly $40,000 to spend, the big question I want answered: should you buy the Civic Type R or should you buy the all-wheel drive Golf R? That's what we're here to find out. So before we get to driving these two hot hatches, a lot of buyers need to first be drawn in by the exterior styling. And this is where both Honda and Volkswagen have completely different viewpoints on what makes a hot hatch look good. In fact, looking at both vehicles, they come from completely opposite ends of the spectrum. And no, I'm not talking about the exterior colors. Looking at the Golf R first, it's pretty hard to even tell this is the hottest Golf you can buy. The styling is very subdued and ordinary, and I wouldn't blame some of you for thinking this is just a regular old Golf hatchback. The headlights were refreshed last year with a full LED design, which includes LED daytime running lights and turn signals, while down in the lower fascia there are no fog lights like in some other Golf models. In its place you'll find these black painted functional air intakes that help with cooling off the engine and provides cooling for other parts of the vehicle. It just looks very understated and sedate. Now in comparison, the Civic Type R, oh my goodness, this thing stands out. And even though it's been on the market for 2 years, just driving this thing around, it turns a lot of heads. In fact, the Golf R is practically invisible aside from the pink color whenever it's parked next to the Civic. Now this is a black Type R, and this color is what hides a lot of the lines for this vehicle, but it's still really gaudy if I do say so myself. You'll have LED headlights as standard, just like the Golf R. You'll have LED turn signals. You have LED fog lights, which isn't on the Golf R because Volkswagen took them away when they refreshed it. But the one thing I'm going to ding Honda for has to be for the fake vents. There's this really massive fake plastic vent covering the fog light housing. I just think it should have been functional. There are some functional vents. I mean, you have some openings for the grille here. You have a functional intake at the top of the hood, which helps to cool the engine down, which looks cohesive to design, but you'll have to let me know in the comments below if you prefer the Civic or you prefer the Golf. For me, I think I prefer the front end design of the Golf more, even though it's not quite as stand-outish as the Civic.
From the side profile of these two hot hatches, you can really tell that the Civic is a much larger car. In fact, its overall length at 179 inches long is 11 inches, almost a foot longer than the Volkswagen. And honestly, I don't really think that the Type R needs to be that big. In fact, the two cars are also much different, or they're very different when you look at the width. The Type R is 3 inches wider than the Golf R, and you really feel the difference when you're driving the two vehicles. One feels like a conventional small hatch, the other kind of feels like a van at times because of how wide it is. Now, in terms of the wheels, when you put about the 20s on the Type R, these are an inch bigger than what you get on the Golf R. They're wrapped in 245 tires. You can see the brakes on the Type R look much more impressive. They're Brembo calipers with cross-drove rotors with a 4-piston caliper at the front. They definitely look aggressive. This car looks like it's ready to go hit the track straight off the showroom floor. Now, in comparison with the Volkswagen or to the Honda, the Golf R comes standard with these 19-inch directional wheels. They are not my favorite wheel design. Volkswagen thankfully offers a 19-inch wheel that's kind of a black finish. That's a 5-spoke design for $250. The Golf R also gives you these black painted R branded calipers, which are also 4-piston. I don't understand why VW changed out the red calipers that you get on the GTI. I just think it looks too understated. But the one thing I will say, the wheels on the Golf R are much better offset. The Type R's wheels are pushed in too far, and this is what it looks like from the factory. So I imagine a lot of owners are going to add some spacers and push the wheels back out because with the gaudy, wide body of this vehicle, the wheels just look a little bit strange. Now at the rear of these two vehicles, one seriously looks like a race car, while the other one just looks like an unconvincing regular Golf with some nice exhaust tips. Now, first of all, I want to talk about the styling of the Golf R because Volkswagen technically updated it for 2018. They finally gave it full LED taillights, which typically were only reserved for the European model. You'll have an LED turn signal, an LED brake light, and you also have an LED tag light and an LED reverse light, which is nice. You have a very subtle R badge at the back here and this little teeny tiny spoiler, which looks like the same spoiler you get on the regular Golf. And then down here you can see you have a nicely black finished rear diffuser area, and then the only indication of the fast one besides the R badge are those really lovely looking quad exhaust tips. Now of course with quad pipes you guys are probably interested. Let's take a listen and hear what the Golf R sounds like. Now the Golf R definitely has a nice deep tone to it, but let's compare the Civic Type R, which has a triple exhaust outlet, and let you guys hear what that sounds like. Now the Type R definitely has been criticized for having a weak sounding exhaust system, and honestly I'm surprised that the VW actually sounds better. I was expecting this one to just make all the racket because it's got styling that makes a lot of noise. Now let's talk about the styling of the Civic really quick. This wing right here, in fact it's got basically double wings and maybe even a triple wing if you count it over here. Honda says these are functional vortex generators. They said this adds a lot of downforce, whatever, when you're driving the car, but it's a front-wheel drive hatch, so I'm not entirely sure if that's really the case unless you take it out to the track often. I will say that the Type R does look good with the wing. It really matches the character of the car. I personally like it. I wish that VW offered a little bit more aggression at the rear for the Golf R. You can see there is a Type R badge. The red Honda emblem, of course, is going to signify this is the Type R. And then there's a lot of things going on down here with the rear diffuser with the fake carbon fiber. And I hate these. I hate these fake vents, which honestly, you can technically convert these to be real, but honestly, Honda, why did you put these here? But the good thing about the black exterior color, it hides the fake vents a little bit more versus the white. These taillights are just an incandescent bulbs, but I will say that this particular car belongs to my videographer and he has replaced the incandescent bulbs with some LED ones to match the Golf R. So let's talk about the cargo space for both vehicles. Opening up the Civic, and with the VW you have to flip up the actual Volkswagen lens. Now the Civic technically offers more cargo space when you have the seats up. Honda rates this at 25.6 cubic feet. I like the little cargo cover over here that Honda gives you where this tray kind of comes out, you can put on the other side. If you fold down the seats, you'll get around 46 cubic feet of space. Now, surprisingly, the VW technically has more cargo space if you fold down the seats. Now with the seats up, VW offers 23 cubic feet of space, which is 3 less than the Honda, but if you fold down the seats, VW says you'll get around 52 cubic feet of space, which is interesting because the Honda is nearly a foot longer, but Volkswagen technically rates it at more space. I will say that in the real world, the Civic's trunk definitely looks larger, and that's really going to matter to a lot of you, especially if you plan on hauling a lot of crap in your hatchback. So even though the outside is really important for a hot hatch, this is where you're going to be spending all your time. So getting into the inside of the Type R, the door, first of all, I think sounds relatively solid. I like the way the door sounds. It has a really nice bang to it. Now, when you want to start the vehicle up, just put the clutch in. Remember, this is a manual. And the vehicle starts right up for you. Now, the one thing about the Type R's interior, it definitely matches the exterior of the vehicle. It's really, bright with all the red. I mean, there's some faux carbon fiber, there's a lot of red accents here and there. And really, when you look at the rest of the interior of the Type R, it's not that it's a bad interior, but I wouldn't call it luxurious, but I also wouldn't call the Golf R luxurious either, which we'll get into that in just a moment. Now, I have done a full video on the Type R. This is actually a 2017 model. It doesn't have the newer infotainment system. I'll actually have a 19 Type R next month to review for you guys, which I'll go in depth with that. But you can see here, it does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It does come with automatic climate control, dual zone, no heated seats. However, you get that on a Civic Si, which is strange. The steering wheel, you can see, is specific to the Type R with the red badge. You have more of the red along the actual wheel. The wheel itself is tilt and telescoping, which is definitely nice. And then you have, materials that are soft touch. You have soft touch on the dashboard here with that faux stitching. You have soft touch door panels here. The windows are one touch automatic for just the front windows, but not the rear. And then the manual transmission. This is probably the best best aspect of the Type R. The seats are probably the next. I mean, it's a really short throw shifter. I like the metal knob, although beware if you guys live in hot areas, this will burn your hand. And it's just a really nice short throw shifter. When you put the vehicle into reverse, you can see the camera does need some work. It's a little bit basic. It does offer 3 different views, but the grading, as you can see, is pretty terrible. Honda definitely needs to work on upgrading that. This car also does come standard with factory nav, which is nice. And overall, I hate the fact that there's no volume knob, but remember the 19 model has that. This is the older Honda Link infotainment system. It's definitely not luxurious, but I like the seats because they really hug you in place. They're covered in this really nice suede fabric material with the kind of the combination. And then the glove compartment here is not damped, but it is a pretty good size. So the one thing that the Type R doesn't offer is a sunroof, which Volkswagen frustratingly doesn't offer on the Golf R either. But let's compare the two. So let's hop into the Volkswagen and see how that interior fits compared to this vehicle. So having just gotten out of the Type R's interior and into the Golf R, this is really going to feel a lot more premium. Now, first shutting the door, I think it sounds more solid than the Type R's door slam. Remember, this is a European car. They tend to have a lot of over-engineered parts. Now, to start the vehicle up, this also comes with push-button start, intelligent access key. Just put your foot on the clutch in because you have the manual, and then push the button down here to fire it up. Now you can see the one thing about the VW that I really like is all of the LED accent lighting in here. I mean, you have LED accent lighting on the doors, on the dashboard, in the lower footwell area. Honda just doesn't offer that, and it really adds to the whole premium ambiance. Now I will say that the overall design of the dash is a little bit boring for me. I think VW needs to do something with the next generation Golf, which apparently they're working on. It just gives it a much more interesting design. But the one thing that I love about the Golf R is definitely the 2 screens. I mean, you have a 10-inch LCD display over here. This is VW's digital cockpit display. You have an 8-inch touchscreen over here, which is an inch larger than what you get in the Civic. And this also comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You can see it has proximity sensing, which definitely looks good. I mean, overall, this just looks much more impressive. I wouldn't necessarily say this feels like a luxury car, but compared to the Civic and compared to, you know, this STI or the Veloster N, this is practically a luxury car. Now, a couple of features this has over the Type R. You get 12-way power seats on the driver's side, a 2-way power on the passenger side. No memory seats though, but you do get 3-level heated seats, which are unavailable on that. I wish VW at this price included cooled seats, which would be nice because they include it on a Jetta. The manual transmission on this particular one, you can see the throws are a little bit longer than the Type R's, which I'm okay with. The seat itself actually, or the shifter itself does feel good. The clutch is definitely longer travel, which I'm noticing, but I'll talk about that when we get into the driving dynamics. When you put the vehicle to reverse, I mean, check out the quality of that backup camera. It's much better resolution. It's still not amazing, but it is amazing when you look at the terrible one that's in the Civic. So Honda, they really need to upgrade that, which they do have an upgraded version in the newer vehicles. Now you can see with the VW, I like the interface of this a lot better than the Hondas. I mean, I just think it looks much more clean. You go to the car display over here, you can see it's got a lot of performance monitors. You can change up the display. If you go to menu over here, and you can go to all your different settings and whatnot. This to me is just easier to navigate. It's quicker, it's snappier. It even also has built-in GPS as well, which by the way, if you want, you can put the map display over here, or if you'd like, you can put the map display over here just by clicking this little button here. It actually swaps out the GPS. I mean, this to me is very Audi-like, and it's one of the reasons why the VW does feel more expensive. So if I was gonna give, you know, a win to the interior, I would definitely go with the Volkswagen, but I will say that the Type R's, while it's not bad, does feel a little bit more special. It feels more like a race car, where this feels like more a luxury car. So it's really just gonna depend on what you like. Now, the one thing, I wish this car also offered a sunroof. VW still doesn't offer a sunroof on this car. The seats, they are full leather, which are very comfortable and supportive, but I think the Type R's have seats that are slightly more comfortable, at least for me. And then the glove compartment, you can see the VW's is lined with felt. It's damped. It does seem a little bit larger than the Hondas, if I'm being honest there, but overall, the interior of the Golf R's is just a completely different environment, but you really will notice the quality difference. So hopping in the back seat of the Type R, these are supposedly practical hot hatches, so you might as well just test out the back seat. Now, Honda says you get around 36 inches of legroom back here. This is identical to the regular Civic hatch. I think the space is actually very good. You can see there is a hump here that takes up your space, but you can see I've got plenty of foot space underneath here. The seats, I also like the way they're designed to not take up more space, but you do lose some functionality. There's no, map pockets here. There's no rear seat air vents. In fact, you can't even seat a middle person here. Honda took away the middle seat and the shoulder belt that you get in the regular Civic hatch. So this is technically a 4-passenger vehicle. What really annoys me is They could have at least given us an armrest if they're going to take away the seat here, but let's hop into the back seat of the Volkswagen and see how it compares. Now, in comparison to the Honda, the VW's back seat isn't actually more spacious in terms of the legroom. Volkswagen says you get around 36 inches of legroom, which is the same as the Honda. You also have a fairly large hump here, but I will say it is a little bit bigger in the VW, so the middle passenger is kind of shafted. But as you notice, there are rear seat air vents back here. You have 2 map pockets, and then there's also a nice little armrest that folds down here to give you cup holders. So obviously, if you're planning to actually put people in the back seats, or you need to fit 5 people, you're going to definitely want the Golf R. So at their cores, these are economy hatchback models, although a little birdie told me that the Type R was technically developed first. But let's start with under the hood of the VW. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, it's held up with a strut as opposed to a prop rod with the Honda. Remember, Volkswagen Premium. Now, when you look at these two vehicles underneath the hood, let's start with the VW, because this is the corporate 2-liter turbocharged TSI 4-cylinder with direct injection. It's the E888 engine family, or AAA engine family. In the Golf R, this is the most powerful output you're going to get, 288 horsepower and 280 foot-pounds of torque. That's 60 more ponies than what you're going to get from a GTI. Unfortunately, it's still down about 18 horsepower compared to the Civic Type R. Now, the beauty about the Golf R, it comes standard with 4-motion all-wheel drive. That's something that Honda could have added to the Type R, but we'll go into the driving dynamics later on. And if you guys are looking for an automatic, this is the only one in the segment that offers a 7-speed quick-shifting dual-clutch transmission. This particular one here, however, is the 6-speed manual, which is more of the purest choice. Fuel economy is rated at 21 in the city, 29 on the highway. As this one sits, it weighs around 3,300 pounds. VW says you should get to 60 in a tick over 5 seconds. Now, in comparison with the VW, the Type R's engine is a little bit more special because they really designed and built this engine, or this engine is really tuned specifically for the Type R. It's also a 2-liter 4-cylinder, their Earth Dreams engine technology with Honda's patented VTEC technology. It makes 306 horsepower, which is very good numbers from a 2-liter, and 295 foot-pounds of torque. So again, 15 more foot-pounds of torque over the VW. Because the Type R only comes with front-wheel drive paired with a standard limited slip differential, this is the lighter option. It weighs around 3,100 pounds. Keep in mind, the VW does not offer a limited slip differential, not a mechanical one. They offer an electronic one. Now, the Type R only comes with a 6-speed manual, and its fuel economy is slightly better by 1 mpg. It's rated at 22 in the city, 28 on the highway, 25 combined versus 24. Both of these, of course, are going to require premium gas. I've seen the 0 to 60 time of this car for as quick as like 4.9 seconds. It really depends on you as a driver, because remember, she's only front-wheel drive. But you guys are all probably curious. Let's get out on the road with both of these hatches and see how they perform. So with how conservative the Golf R looks on the outside, surprisingly, when you get into the interior of this car and start driving it, you kind of immediately sense that it is a special Golf. I mean, the one thing you hear constantly when you put it into its race mode with the exhaust is it's got a synthesized growl. I mean, I don't know if I like the growl. I do like how this car has more noise than the Type R. The Type R just sounds dead to me most of the times. It sounds like a vacuum cleaner from the exhaust. It's really disappointing with how it looks so aggressive on the outside. It drives like a race car. It just doesn't have the sound. This has a meaner sound to me, and I like it right off the bat. Now, the Golf R also is so much smaller. I mean, sitting in this thing, you have this low hood, these really big mirrors, you have a good view out of the front. This is the easier car to see out of, to drive, to park, because it's not so wide, which is why I said the Type R doesn't need to be so wide. Volkswagen has shown that you can have a fun hot hatch that handles well. It doesn't need to be so big, but the beauty about this car is it's all-wheel drive, so when you put your foot down, no torque steer, no wheel hop, just lots of smooth acceleration. It's quick. I mean, yes, it doesn't feel quite as quick and ferocious as the Type R. In a drag race, this will lose all the time, unless you get the dual clutch model, because the manual just isn't able to, shift as quickly as the dual clutch, and you are down on power. This car, surprisingly, this Volkswagen engine has always been slightly underrated. It's always felt much more powerful, but really Honda has taken the lead there with their 2-liter. It just is a much more powerful, torquier feeling engine. This is not bad. You do feel a little bit of turbo lag, whereas the Type R has a little bit of turbo lag as well, but really it's the all-wheel drive that makes this thing so much more sure-footed. It's got steering that isn't quite as heavy feeling and direct and communicative or as fast as the Type R's, but it's not, bad either. I mean, Volkswagen definitely has some room for improvement, so I'm sure they're working on that with the next generation Golf R. but this is still a plenty fun vehicle to drive, even though it's not quite as fast. Now the clutch in this vehicle, I actually don't like as much as the Type Rs. The Type R has a shorter travel clutch. It engages, you know, right in the middle of the travel. This is longer travel. You have to put when you let off the clutch, you're looking for the engagement point, it's at the end of the travel, which is not something that I actually prefer. But the one thing about this car that's nice is when you put it into its ESC Sport mode, it'll actually let you rev it up to like $5 grand. Oh, Jesus. I don't recommend that for your clutch, but this thing definitely launches harder than the Type R. And in race mode, you can feel the ride quality can get a little bit firm, but they honestly, the two cars ride very similarly. The Type R's ride, so for how wide and low profile the tires are, actually is quite agreeable. It matches this Golf R. This is a car that you could easily daily drive. Now I will say that the features in this interior make me want to take this on a longer trip more than the Type R. I mean, you've got this beautiful digital cockpit display, you have a beautiful 8-inch touchscreen over here, you have a much better user interface for the infotainment system. You have seats that don't hug you quite as much, but I will say that I like the leather. I'm a fan of leather, and I also like the heated seats. I wish VW offered cooled seats on this. I imagine they're going to rectify that with the next generation Golf R. The visibility in here is just so much better. The leather on the steering wheel feels a little bit higher quality because I like the stitching. So this feels like a car that's better built, that's more high quality, not necessarily luxurious, but it's definitely, you know, much more premium feeling. Premium is probably the word I would use. This car essentially drives the way that I wish the Mazda 3 drove. Like the new Mazda 3, I wish the Mazda 3 drove like this. If Mazda would ever come out with a Speed 3 and put all-wheel drive, or a Speed 3 and put all-wheel drive in it, that'd be great. Now fuel economy, in my weeks worth of testing, I got about 21 miles to the gallon in mostly city driving. On the highway, I pushed it up to about 32 mpg. So not bad mpg numbers, not quite as good as the Type Rs, but remember this one is all-wheel drive, so of course it's not going to be better. But other than that, you know, driving the two cars back to back, it's really hard for me to pick a winner. I like driving both of them. They have a different expression, a different, you know, flavor of a hot hatch. Basically, each manufacturer has their own distinctive taste on what they believe a hot hatch is to be. So picking a winner is going to definitely be tough. Now, one area where the Golf R really has the Type R beat has to do with safety. Unlike the Honda, which Honda Sensing is not available, Volkswagen throws in basically their entire suite of safety tech in this vehicle. I've got full speed adaptive cruise control, I've got front assist, which includes automatic emergency braking, I've got blind spot monitoring with rear cross traffic alert, I have lane assist, so this thing will actually kind of try to keep you centered in the lane. So Honda doesn't offer any of their Honda Sensing on the Type R. Now, previously, I would say that that's okay because people who buy a car like this don't care, but obviously with Volkswagen throwing it in, you can get it with a manual transmission for essentially not much more money than the Type R. If you look in the real world with the real transaction prices, it makes me think, why doesn't Honda offer Honda Sensing on the Type R? So having just stepped out of the Golf R and into the Type R, this vehicle instantly feels much bigger and wider versus the Golf R, because it is. It almost feels like I'm piloting like a minivan or just a wide SUV at times, because from the front view, the hood scoop is very noticeable. You can easily feel the wide fenders of this car. And it just kind of makes me think to myself, why did Honda have to make this car feel so big? I just don't think it was necessary. I prefer the smaller feel of the Golf R to the wideness of this Type R. But one drive in the Type R, and it's easy to feel how this car is the much more track-focused car. From the way the engine responds, to the way the shifter feels, to the way the steering is so heavy and direct in this car, and just the stiffness. This car feels much stiffer than the Golf R, especially when you go into the R Plus drive modes. The steering gets ridiculously heavy. It's just better than the Golf R in general. And then whenever you put your foot down, this thing has an urgency to rev and go like you'd expect from a Honda VTEC engine, but because it's a turbo, it's got lots of torque everywhere, and that's what makes the Type R such a beauty. If you guys have never driven, you know, a turbocharged Honda, this thing will seriously, you know, shock you because of how much torque it has. So much torque everywhere with all this boost. It has kind of a peaky nature as well, where you can feel the VTEC kick in above 5,000 RPM and the turbo kick in, so it gives you a nice shove. This car will smoke the Type R, or the Golf R every time. And that's a shame because this car is front-wheel drive. It shouldn't smoke the Golf R considering the Golf R has all-wheel drive, but this does have more horsepower. It feels like it's underrated compared to the Golf R. And the steering in this thing, man, I would much rather be in a track on this car versus the Golf R. The Golf R is not bad. You know, there are times where I feel like the Golf R is more comfortable. The ride quality though in this car, for how big the tires are, how narrow the sidewalls are, for how stiff the chassis is in R Plus right now, it actually is pretty agreeable in terms of the ride comfort. So Honda has really nailed the whole balance here, and you don't really have to make too much in terms of compromises with the Type R. It being such a race-focused car, you can still daily do this thing every day. The visibility in here is, good. It's got big side mirrors. The one thing this car is missing entirely is any driver assistance tech. I wish that Honda, would offer it. Even on the 19 Type R, they don't offer, their Honda sensing system. And I think they should, because I think even though this is a hot hatch, as long as you can turn it off, I think those safety features are stuff that people would prefer to have, or would at least like to have the option of having, along with a sunroof. But again, the Golf R doesn't offer a sunroof either. Now, in my week's worth of testing, I've been averaging around 21.5 miles to the gallon in this thing, which is a little better than the Golf R. Not surprising, since this is a little bit of a lighter vehicle. It's also front-wheel drive. But that front-wheel drive limitation does show up whenever you try to launch this thing. Where it's not much in terms of torque steer, but there is a good amount of wheel hop. So you will notice that because this is a front wheel drive car, it does have some of that wheel hop. The Golf R, on the other hand, you could do a 5,000 RPM clutch dump. This will not let you go past 3,500 RPM, but when you do get the traction, or limited tires to hook up, this car will do 0 to 60 in just under 5 seconds, depending on how fast you can shift and whatnot. So this is the quicker car. It feels more race focused. It gets a lot more attention out on the road because of the way it looks. It's the cooler car. It's the more desirable car. I think that's exactly the reason why some people will prefer the Type R over the Golf R, just because of that, look of this thing. Even though some of you may not like the look, the way it drives, the way it feels, aside from the very weak exhaust noise. It's funny because the Golf R actually sounds better, but it's a fake noise, versus this just kind of sounds like a vacuum cleaner at times. It doesn't really have any noise at all, but I guess that's what the aftermarket is for.
So at the end of the day, these two vehicles offer a completely different perspective on what each manufacturer thinks of when you say hot hatch. At one end of the spectrum, you've got the Golf R, which is very, very conservative compared to most of the competition. You guys saw its interior. Looks like it could go in a much more expensive car. It really just looks like a regular Golf, minus some extra exhaust tips and this super bright pink color. But as you guys saw from the test drive, this vehicle still has the fire that it takes to drive like a hot hatch. It's got a wonderful turbocharged engine. It's got an all-wheel drive system, which if you guys are looking for all-wheel drive, this is one of the few options you're gonna want, especially if you wanna get it with a manual transmission or a dual clutch. And its ride quality is very comfortable. This is the car that you could easily take on a 500-mile road trip and then take it out to the track later on, although it's not the most track-focused weapon, which is where the Type R comes in, because this is the car that has the handling and performance that matches its gaudy exterior design. Now, even though the exterior design may not be your cup of tea, I think it looks better in certain colors. The interior, while it's not as nice as the Volkswagen, you guys saw this car still rides and handles extremely well. You would think with these massive 20-inch wheels and the stiff suspension, it'd have an awful ride quality, but Honda has done a tremendous job with tuning the ride quality. It is the quicker car in day-to-day driving just because of the turbo engine. This car is just much more flexible. I will say that the VW sounds better, but it's a fake sound, but the Honda's is just too quiet, especially when you look at the overall styling of this car. Now, if you're going to ask me which one I would buy, this is definitely an area that is pretty close to my heart with choosing these two cars. When I was in high school, I used to want the hottest version of hot hatch from Volkswagen or from Honda, and quite frankly, picking the two is a tough choice. But for me, if I was going to spend about $40,000, I would probably pick the Type R still, just because I knew that there's a new version of the Golf R coming. I think this car looks too conservative on the outside, and I personally want my hot hatch to scream a little bit more, and you're not really losing anything in terms of practicality and drivability with the Type R. So really, it's just going to come down to which one you personally like. For me, I would go for the Type R. Now, keep in mind the pricing of these two vehicles. This one here starts at $40,000. With this $2,500 color, it stickers for around $42,000. The Type R, it's pretty easy. You just
pick a Type R, it's about $36,000 with destination. The color is not an extra cost. Now, with that said, the Type Rs do still have a markup, at least at the dealers here in the Northern Virginia area. I've seen dealers charge between $5,000 to almost $10,000 over sticker, whereas with the Volkswagen, VW dealers are actually discounting this car a couple $1,000s. So really, they're going to be roughly the same. It's just going to depend on which one you actually prefer, which one is more of your cup of tea. So with all that said, be sure to let me know in the comments below which one you guys would actually buy. If it was your money, would you buy the Honda Civic Type R or would you buy the Volkswagen Golf R? But I hope you guys have enjoyed my full comparison test between these two hot hatchbacks. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always guys, please be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can keep track with all the latest videos. Thank you so much for watching guys. I'll catch you all in the next video.